I remember the day my life turned upside down like it was yesterday. It was a typical Saturday afternoon, one that promised nothing more than the usual family routine. I had just finished mowing the lawn, the smell of freshly cut grass still lingering in the air, when I decided to take a break and check my phone. That's when I saw it, a message that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my marriage. The message was innocuous at first glance, just a text from my wife Lisa to the swim coach Mark. But as I opened it, my heart raced. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Let's make sure no one finds out." My stomach dropped. I read it again, hoping it was just a misunderstanding, but the words were clear. The betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt the world around me fade, replaced by a tunnel of rage and disbelief. Thoughts raced through my mind. How could she do this to me, to us, to our child? I could feel the heat rising in my chest, and before I knew it, I was storming into the house, my heart pounding. Lisa was in the kitchen preparing a snack for our son Jake, who was busy playing with his toys in the living room. The normalcy of the scene felt like a cruel joke. "Lisa," I shouted, my voice trembling with anger. She turned to me, a look of confusion on her face. "What is this?" I held up my phone, the screen glowing with her treachery. Her eyes widened, and for a brief moment I saw a flicker of fear. "James, I can explain," she started, but I cut her off. "Explain what exactly?" "How you're sleeping with our kid's swim coach. Is that the explanation I'm supposed to accept?" My voice was rising, and I could feel the tension in the air thickening. The reality of her infidelity was suffocating. Tears began to stream down her face, and for a moment I felt a pang of sympathy. But it was quickly overshadowed by a wave of fury. "You think this is a joke? You think you can just betray me and act like it's nothing?" I couldn't believe the woman I loved, the mother of my child, would throw away everything we built together for a man who was supposed to be a mentor to our son. "I'm so sorry, James. It was a mistake. I never meant for it to happen," she pleaded, her voice shaky. But the words felt hollow. The trust we had was shattered, and no amount of apologies could fix it. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to make her feel the pain that was coursing through my veins. Instead, I felt numb, as if I was watching a terrible movie unfold. I turned away from her, unable to look at the woman I once adored. "You need to leave," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't bear the sight of her, the sight of the life we had built together, now tainted by her betrayal. Lisa, still crying, begged me to reconsider. But I was done. I needed to think, and I couldn't do that with her in the same room. I walked out of the house, the door slamming behind me. I needed air, space to process the whirlwind of emotions that were crashing over me like waves. Outside, the sun shone brightly, oblivious to my inner turmoil. I felt like I was in a fog, my mind racing with thoughts of revenge, anger, and confusion. How could she do this? How could I have been so blind? The more I thought about it, the more my anger boiled. I felt like I had been duped, and it fueled a fire within me that I had never known existed. I paced around the yard, my thoughts spiraling into darker territories. I couldn't let this go unpunished. Mark was not just a swim coach, he was a predator in my eyes. He took advantage of my trust, my family, and it made my blood boil. The idea of confronting him filled me with a sense of purpose and determination. I had to make him pay for what he had done. As I stood there, my heart racing, I began to formulate a plan. I would not only confront him but ensure that he would never coach again. He had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed, and I was going to make sure he faced the consequences. The thought of him being banned from every sports program filled me with a sense of justice I desperately needed. The days that followed were a haze of anger and betrayal. I barely spoke to Lisa, and when I did, it was only to exchange cold words about our son's schedule or household matters. I felt like a ghost in my own home, haunted by the knowledge of her infidelity, and my heart was heavy with confusion. How could the woman I loved betray me so profoundly? I replayed every moment in my mind, searching for signs I had missed, wondering how I could have been so blind to her deception. I found myself oscillating between the urge to scream and the desire to retreat into silence. Each time I saw Lisa, I felt a surge of anger that made my blood boil. I wanted her to understand the weight of her actions, to feel the pain she had inflicted upon me. I was no longer just a husband. I was a wounded animal, ready to lash out at anyone who had hurt me. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that my anger was not just directed at Lisa. It was also aimed at Mark, the swim coach. He was the one who had crossed a line, who had taken advantage of my trust in my family. I couldn't let him get away with it. I had to act, and I had to do so quickly before my anger turned into something even darker. In the quiet hours of the night when the house was still and my mind was racing, I began to craft a plan. I knew I needed evidence, something concrete that would expose Mark for who he was. I spent hours searching online, looking for any complaints or issues associated with him. I found nothing. It was as if he had a clean slate, and I was determined to change that. I started by reaching out to other parents in the swim program. I wanted to gather as much information as I could about Mark's behavior. I created a fake account on social media, posing as a concerned parent looking for information about the coach. I was careful. I didn't want anyone to suspect my true intentions. The more I learned, the more I felt the fire of revenge burning within me. One evening, I met with a few parents at a local cafe, and the conversation turned to the swim program. Have you guys noticed how close Mark gets to some of the kids? I casually asked, trying to gauge their reactions. The parents exchanged glances and one mother spoke up. I've seen him get a bit too friendly with some of the girls. It makes me uncomfortable. I felt a surge of hope. Maybe I wasn't alone in my concerns. I pressed further, asking if anyone had voiced their worries to the program directors. The response was disheartening. Most parents shrugged it off, unwilling to rock the boat. But I knew I had to take the lead. If I wanted to see Mark gone, I had to rally support. In the days that followed, I gathered more testimonies from parents who shared my concerns. I collected their stories, documenting every instance that felt inappropriate. I could feel my resolve strengthening. Mark had to be stopped, and I was going to be the one to do it. The confrontation with Lisa was inevitable. I needed her to understand the depth of my anger and the reasons behind my actions. One night after Jake had gone to bed, I confronted her in the living room. Do you even care about what you've done? About how it affects our family? I asked, my voice low but firm. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. I made a terrible mistake, James. I never wanted to hurt you or Jake. I love you both. You don't get to say that, I snapped. You don't get to act like this is something we can just brush aside. Mark is a predator, and while you're busy making excuses for your betrayal, I'm going to make sure he pays for what he's done. Lisa's expression shifted from sorrow to anger. You can't just ruin someone's life because of a mistake. You're being irrational. I'm being rational, I shot back. You think this is just about you and me. It's about our son, too. He deserves better than to have a man like Mark around him. The tension in the room was palpable. I could see the realization dawning on her face, that I was serious, that I was willing to fight for our family, even if it meant tearing apart what remained of our relationship. I turned away from her, feeling the weight of my decision settle in. I was going to take action, and I was willing to do whatever it took to ensure Mark never taught again. The moral implications of my revenge weighed heavily on me, but I justified it with the thought of protecting my family. This was not just about my shattered heart. It was about justice for Jake and ensuring that no other family would suffer as we had. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling of determination coursing through me. I had a plan, and I was ready to execute it. Mark was going to regret ever crossing me. As the days turned into a blur of planning and gathering information, I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. I was no longer just a husband dealing with infidelity. I was a man on a mission. The weight of betrayal fueled my resolve, and with each passing moment, I grew more determined to see my plan through to the end. I had to act decisively, and I knew that the first step was to confront Mark directly. I did a bit of digging to uncover Mark's schedule. He was a busy man, coaching multiple swim teams across the area, but I managed to find out that he had a meet coming up at a nearby pool. It was the perfect opportunity for me to confront him without raising any suspicion. I would gather the evidence I needed and make sure he understood that his actions had consequences. The day of the meet arrived, and I felt a mix of anxiety and adrenaline coursing through me. I arrived early, the scent of chlorine filling the air as I watched families gather, parents chatting and kids warming up in the pool. I spotted Mark across the deck, laughing and joking with the swimmers, his demeanor relaxed and carefree. It made my blood boil. I took a deep breath, calming my racing heart. I knew I had to approach him with a clear head. As I walked toward him, I could feel the tension building in my chest. This was it. I was going to confront the man who had shattered my world. "Mark," I called out, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He turned, a smile fading from his face as he recognized me. "Can we talk for a minute?" "Sure, James, what's up?" he replied, his tone casual as if we were just two friends catching up. I could feel my fists clenching at my sides, but I forced myself to remain calm. "I think we need to discuss your relationship with Lisa," I said, my voice low but firm. The smile on his face disappeared completely. He glanced around, seemingly assessing the situation before focusing back on me. "Look, man, it was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to happen," he said, attempting to brush it off. "You have to understand," I cut him off, my anger flaring. "You don't get to minimize what you did. You think it's just a mistake. You've crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. I won't let you near my family again." His expression shifted from surprise to defensiveness. "You don't know what you're talking about. We were both caught up in the moment. It didn't mean anything." I felt my blood boiling. It meant something to me, Mark. It meant everything. "You took advantage of my trust, and I'm not going to let you get away with it." The confrontation drew the attention of a few parents nearby, their curious gazes fixed on us. I could see Mark's confidence waver, a flicker of fear crossing his face. I had his attention, and I knew I needed to capitalize on it. "I've been talking to other parents," I continued, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "They've noticed your behavior too. You're not as untouchable as you think. I'm going to make sure you never coach again." Mark's face paled, and I could see the wheels turning in his head as he realized the implications of my words. "You wouldn't do that," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "Think about your kid. You really want to ruin things for him over this." "Don't you dare bring my son into this," I shot back, my voice rising again. "You've already ruined enough for him. I'm protecting him from you." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving Mark standing there, his face a mixture of anger and fear. I had made my point, but I knew it was just the beginning. I needed to gather more evidence, something undeniable that would ensure his downfall. In the following days, I reached out to the parents I had spoken to previously, gathering their statements and concerns about Mark's behavior. I documented everything meticulously, creating a file that would serve as my weapon against him. It felt empowering to take action, to turn my pain into something productive. I was no longer the victim. I was the avenger. I decided to contact the swim program's director, a woman named Karen, who had been running the program for years. I wanted to ensure that she understood the gravity of the situation. I set up a meeting, my heart racing as I prepared to present my case against Mark. When I met with Karen, I could see that she was skeptical at first. "James, I understand you're upset, but accusations like this are serious. We need evidence before we can take any action," she said, crossing her arms as she leaned back in her chair. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. "I understand that, Karen, but I have testimonies from multiple parents. This isn't just a personal vendetta. Mark's behavior has raised serious concerns, and I believe he poses a risk to the kids he coaches." As I laid out my case, detailing the conversations I had with other parents and the evidence I had gathered, I could see her expression change. She was no longer dismissive, she was listening. "If what you're saying is true, we can't ignore it," she finally said, her voice serious. I felt a spark of hope. This was the moment I had been waiting for. "All I'm asking is that you investigate, look into his background, speak to the parents, and take this seriously. I can't let him continue coaching after what he's done." Karen nodded slowly. "I'll look into it. But I can't promise anything will happen immediately." That was all I needed to hear. I left her office feeling a mix of relief and determination. I was on the right path, and I knew I had to keep pushing. Mark's days as a swim coach were numbered, and I was going to make sure of it. As the days passed, I found myself trapped in a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, I felt a sense of purpose in my quest for justice. On the other, I was grappling with the aftermath of my crumbling marriage and the weight of my actions. Lisa and I continued to coexist in a tense silence, our conversations limited to the necessities of parenting. I could see the confusion in Jake's eyes, the way he sensed the tension between us. It broke my heart, but I couldn't afford to think about that now. I was focused on one thing, bringing Mark down. After my meeting with Corinne, I stayed in touch with her, pressing for updates. I could sense that she was taking my concerns seriously, but I also knew that the wheels of bureaucracy turned slowly. I needed to do more to ensure that Mark was held accountable. I decided to take matters into my own hands and gather more concrete evidence that would leave no room for doubt. I reached out to a couple of parents who had expressed concerns about Mark's behavior. I arranged to meet them at a local park, where we could talk away from prying ears. As I sat on a bench, I felt a mix of nerves and anticipation. I needed their support, and I hoped they would be willing to speak out. When they arrived, I introduced myself to Sarah and Tom, a couple whose daughter had been on the swim team. For a couple of years, they were friendly but cautious, glancing around as if worried someone might overhear our conversation. "Thanks for coming," I said, trying to sound calm. "I wanted to talk to you about Mark." Sarah looked at me, her brow furrowed. "We've noticed some things too, but we're not sure what to do about it. We don't want to cause any trouble." I nodded, understanding their hesitation. "I get it, but this isn't just about trouble, it's about our kids' safety. I'm gathering evidence to present to the swim program, and I think it would help if we all spoke out together." Tom crossed his arms, looking skeptical. "What do you mean by evidence? Are you talking about formal complaints?" "Yes," I replied, my voice steady. "I believe that if we all come forward with our concerns, they'll have to take it seriously. I've already spoken to a few other parents who feel the same way. This isn't just a personal grudge, it's about protecting our children." After some discussion, they agreed to share their experiences. Sarah recounted a time when she overheard Mark making inappropriate comments to some of the girls during practice. "It wasn't anything overt, but it made me uncomfortable. He was too familiar with them, like he was crossing a line." Tom added, "I've seen him get too close to some kids, especially during one-on-one sessions. It just doesn't sit right with me." With each shared story, I felt a growing sense of solidarity. Together, we could hold Mark accountable. We spent the afternoon discussing how to formally present our concerns, and by the end of our meeting, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. We were going to take action, and I was going to lead the charge. Over the next few weeks, we gathered testimonies from more parents, each one echoing the same concerns. I compiled everything into a neatly organized document detailing the pattern of troubling behavior that Mark had exhibited. I could feel the pressure building, and I knew it was time to escalate things further. I reached out to Corinne again, requesting another meeting. This time, I was armed with a dossier of evidence. When I arrived at her office, I felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation. I needed her to understand the seriousness of the situation. "James." Corinne greeted me, her expression serious. "I've been looking into your concerns, but I need you to understand that I can't act without substantial proof." I nodded, pulling out the folder I had prepared. "I've gathered testimonies from several parents who have witnessed Mark's inappropriate behavior. I believe this is enough evidence for you to take action." As I laid out the documents on her desk, I could see her expression shift. She began to read through the accounts, and I watched as her brow furrowed with concern. "This is serious," she finally said, looking up at me. "I didn't realize the extent of the issues." I leaned in, my voice steady. "I'm asking you to take this seriously, Corinne. We can't let him continue coaching if he poses a risk to the kids. This is about their safety." After a long pause, she nodded. "I'll launch an investigation. I can't promise immediate action, but I will take your concerns to the board." I felt a rush of relief mixed with anxiety. This was a significant step forward, but it was only the beginning. I knew that Mark wouldn't go down without a fight, and I had to be prepared for whatever came next. As I left Corinne's office, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of a precipice. I was committed to seeing this through, but I also knew that my actions would have consequences. I was determined to protect my family, but I wondered what price I would ultimately pay for my revenge. In the following days, I continued to gather support from other parents while keeping my eyes on Mark's movements. I could see him coaching, laughing with the kids, and completely oblivious to the storm brewing around him. I felt a mix of anger and determination. He had no idea what was coming, and I was going to make sure he faced the consequences of his actions. The investigation was underway, and I was ready to do everything in my power to ensure that Mark would never coach again. I was fueled by the pain of betrayal, and I was prepared to fight for my family, no matter the cost. As the investigation progressed, I found myself caught in a tense waiting game. Each day felt like an eternity as I anxiously anticipated news. From Corinne about Mark's fate, I was in a constant state of alert, my mind racing with thoughts of what might happen next. Would the swim program take my concerns seriously? Would Mark retaliate in some way? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was playing a dangerous game. I continued to meet with other parents, sharing updates and gathering their support. They were all invested in the outcome, and I could sense their growing frustration with Mark's behavior. One evening, I organized a small gathering at my house, inviting the parents who had spoken out against him. We sat in my living room, tension palpable as we discussed what we could do next. "I just don't understand how he's still allowed to coach," Sarah said, her voice laced with frustration. "It's like no one cares about the kids." Tom nodded in agreement. "We need to keep pushing. If we don't make noise, nothing will change." I felt a sense of camaraderie among the group. "We need to be prepared for anything," I said, my tone resolute. "If Mark finds out about our complaints, he might try to discredit us or intimidate us. We have to stay united and support one another." As we strategized, I couldn't help but think about the toll this was taking on my own family. Lisa and I were barely speaking, and Jake was starting to notice the tension. I felt guilty about dragging others into my personal vendetta, but I reminded myself that this was about protecting our children. Mark had crossed a line, and I was willing to fight for justice. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Corinne reached out to me with an update. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop, and I arrived with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. As I walked in, I spotted her sitting at a table, her expression serious. "James," she greeted me, her tone grave. "I've spoken with the board about your concerns and the testimonies you provided." My heart raced, and "they've decided to suspend Mark while we conduct a full investigation," she said, her voice steady. "However, I need to warn you that there may be pushback. Mark has a strong reputation, and he will likely fight to keep his position." Relief washed over me, but it was quickly overshadowed by the realization that this was only the beginning. "What can I do to help?" I asked, eager to take the next step. "We may need you and the other parents to provide formal statements," Corinne replied. "If Mark decides to contest the suspension, your testimonies will be crucial." I nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "I'll gather everyone and make sure we're ready. We can't let him intimidate us." As I left the coffee shop, a mix of emotions swirled within me. I felt a sense of victory, but I also knew that the battle was far from over. I was determined to see this through, to ensure that Mark faced the consequences of his actions. In the days that followed, I coordinated with the other parents to prepare our statements. We met several times, discussing our experiences and rehearsing what we would say. It felt empowering to stand together, united in our mission to protect our children. But just as I felt we were gaining momentum, I received a phone call that sent my anxiety skyrocketing. It was Lisa. "James, we need to talk," she said, her voice strained. I hesitated, unsure of what to expect. "About what?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "About Jake," she said, her voice cracking. "He's been asking why we're fighting all the time. He's confused, and I don't know how to explain it to him." The guilt washed over me like a wave. I had been so consumed by my quest for revenge that I hadn't considered the impact it was having on our son. "I didn't mean for this to affect him," I said, my voice softening. "I'm just trying to protect him." "I know," Lisa replied, her tone more understanding. "But we need to find a way to communicate better. We can't let him feel like he's in the middle of our fight." I sighed, realizing she was right. Let's sit down with him tonight. We can talk it through and try to explain things in a way he can understand. That evening, we sat together on the couch, Jake nestled between us. I felt a pang of sadness as I looked at him, his innocent eyes filled with confusion. "Hey, buddy, we want to talk to you about some things," I said. My voice steady. Jake looked at us, his brow furrowed. "Why are you and Mom always arguing? Is it because of the swim coach?" I felt my heart sink. "Yes, it is, but it's more complicated than that. We're trying to make sure you're safe and happy," I explained gently. Lisa chimed in. "We love you very much and we're working through some problems, but we want you to know that it's not your fault and we're going to figure it out together." Jake's expression softened and I could see the relief wash over him. "Okay," he said, his voice small. "I just want us to be happy again." In that moment, I realized that my quest for revenge had consequences beyond my own pain. It was affecting the most important part of my life, my family. I had to find a balance between seeking justice and being present for my son. I promised myself that I would do whatever it took to protect him, even if it meant letting go of my quest for vengeance. As the investigation into Mark continued, I found myself at a crossroads. I was still determined to see him brought to justice, but I also needed to be mindful of my family's emotional well-being. It was a delicate balance, and I was determined to navigate it as best as I could. The weeks that followed felt like a roller coaster ride of emotions. The investigation into Mark was ongoing, and I found myself increasingly anxious about the outcome. I had spent so much time focused on revenge that I was beginning to lose sight of what truly mattered, my family and their well-being. After that candid conversation with Jake, I made a conscious effort to be more present. I started spending quality time with him, taking him to the park, playing games, and just talking. I wanted him to know that despite the turmoil surrounding us, he was loved and cherished. Lisa and I worked together to create a more supportive environment for him, and it felt good to be united, even if it was under difficult circumstances. One evening, as we sat together watching a movie, I turned to Lisa. "I know things have been rough between us, but I appreciate you being here for Jake. We need to keep working together, no matter what happens with Mark." She nodded, her expression softening. "I want that too, James. I know we've made mistakes, but I believe we can get through this if we support each other." As we continued to navigate the complexities of our relationship, I received a call from Corinne that changed everything. "James, I need to speak with you urgently," she said, her tone serious. My heart raced as I listened. "What is it?" "Mark has requested a hearing to contest his suspension. He's challenging the allegations against him and he's threatening to bring legal action if we don't reinstate him," she explained. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. I had anticipated pushback, but this felt like a direct attack. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice strained. "We need to prepare for the hearing. I'll need you and the other parents to provide formal statements and be ready to testify if necessary," Corinne responded. "This is serious, and we need to present a united front." I felt a surge of determination. "We'll do whatever it takes. I won't let him intimidate us." Over the next few days, we gathered as many parents as we could to prepare for the hearing. The atmosphere was tense, but there was also a sense of solidarity. We were in this together, and we were all committed to protecting our children. The day of the hearing arrived, and I felt a mix of anxiety and resolve as I entered the conference room. It was filled with board members, parents, and of course Mark, who sat at the front, looking smug and confident. I felt a surge of anger at the sight of him. How could he sit there with that self-satisfied expression after everything he had done? As the proceedings began, I listened intently to the testimonies from the other parents. Each one recounted their experiences, their voices steady and resolute. I could see the impact our collective voices had on the board members, who were visibly concerned by the gravity of the situation. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm here today because I believe in protecting our children," I began, looking around the room. "Mark's behavior has raised serious concerns among many parents, and we cannot ignore it. We owe it to our kids to ensure they are safe in their activities." As I spoke, I felt a wave of determination wash over me. I was no longer just a husband seeking revenge. I was a father fighting for the safety and well-being of my child and the other children in the program. I shared my experiences, my fears, and my hopes for a safer environment. When the hearing concluded, I felt a mixture of relief and uncertainty. I had put everything on the line, and now it was up to the board to make their decision. A few days later, I received a call from Karen. "James, I have some news," she said, her tone serious. "The board has made a decision regarding Mark." My heart raced. "What is it?" "They've decided to uphold his suspension and terminate his contract due to the findings of the investigation. Your testimonies and those of the other parents were crucial in this decision," she explained. A wave of relief washed over me, but it was quickly followed by a sense of bittersweet victory. Mark was done as a coach, but the path to get here had been painful. I had fought for justice, but it had come at a cost. In the days that followed, I felt a shift in my relationship with Lisa. We had navigated the storm together, and while there were still unresolved issues between us, the experience had brought us closer in some ways. We had faced a common enemy, and it had forced us to communicate more openly. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, I turned to her. "I know we still have a long way to go, but I'm grateful for how we've managed to work together through this." Lisa nodded, her expression softening. "I am too. I think we've both learned a lot about what we need to do to support each other and Jake." As we continued to rebuild our relationship, I also reflected on what I had learned from this experience. The pain of betrayal had driven me to seek revenge, but I realized that true strength came from standing up for what was right while also being there for my family. I had fought for justice, and in doing so, I had rediscovered the importance of love, trust, and communication. I knew that moving forward would require effort, but I was hopeful. My family was healing, and we were learning to navigate this new chapter together. As I looked at Jake playing happily in the living room, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I had fought for his safety, and while the scars of betrayal would remain, I was determined to create a brighter future for him and for us.